I was locked in a room while they signed over my house. They thought I couldn't hear, but the camera caught it all. The air in the house was too still, the kind that settles before something breaks. Brittany stood at the foot of the staircase, her smile stretched thin enough to cut glass. "Mom," she said sweetly, "I think it's time we made peace. I got you something special, it's up in the attic." Her voice was all sugar and threat. I looked at her for a moment, wondering which part of that sentence was the lie. I should have known. But after 70 years, you start hoping people mean their words, even when they don't. I took the first step up, one hand on the railing, the other brushing against the old wallpaper I'd picked out 40 years ago. The scent of cedar and dust filled the narrow space. I hadn't been up there since Henry died. It was where we stored the past this tools, my wedding dress, the little wooden box that still smelled faintly of lavender. "You'll find it on the trunk near the window," Brittany called up. "You can't miss it." Her heels clicked against the floor below, sharp and impatient. I reached the top, squinting at the weak light coming through the small attic window. There it was, a box, wrapped in silver paper, sitting on Henry's old trunk. For a brief second, I felt a pang of something that almost resembled hope. Maybe, I thought, just maybe, this was her attempt at reconciliation. I walked over and bent down, my knees creaking in protest, my fingers brushing the edge of the paper. The moment I lifted the lid, the sound came, clomp. The door slammed behind me, hard enough to shake dust from the rafters. I froze, my hand still resting on the box, which was empty. Silence, then a laugh light, cruel, echoing through the ceiling. "Toi dai come da ketu kroi," Brittany sneered in Vietnamese for effect before switching back, her voice rising with a sick kind of joy. "Your era's over, Veronica. Now rot in that dusty attic and watch us own your house, LOL." The sound of her laughter stabbed through the floorboards, followed by Aaron's muffled protest. "Brittany, maybe we shouldn't." "She's useless," Brittany snapped. "Sign it now." I didn't move. I simply stared at the locked door, at the old brass handle Henry had installed himself. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I reached for the framed photograph of Henry on the trunk, the one where his smile still carried the quiet patience of a man who fixed everything with his hands. "Henry," I whispered, "they've finally started. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening." I sat down slowly on the floorboards, the dust swirling in the thin ray of afternoon sun cutting through the window. I ran my fingers along the edges of the frame. "They think I'm frightened," I said softly. "They never did understand me." I could hear Brittany pacing below, the sharp tap of her shoes matching the thud of my heartbeat. Somewhere, Aaron's voice tried to soften her fury. "We'll just say she signed it," he whispered. "No one will question." "Oh, please." She laughed. "That woman barely remembers her own birthday. Who's going to believe her over us?" I smiled just slightly. I had heard that tone before, years ago, when she first joined this family and started rearranging everything. The photo albums went into boxes, the curtains replaced with modern ones, the house slowly scrubbed of me. I used to tell Henry that kindness was a kind of blindness. He would just shake his head and say, "Better to be blind with love than see through hate." He was wrong. Sometimes you needed both eyes open. The air grew warmer. I stood up, brushing the dust from my skirt, and walked toward the small window overlooking the garden. Below, Brittany stood by the patio doors, her hand resting possessively on Aaron's shoulder as they talked to a man in a suit. A notary, maybe. I could make out fragments of their words. "Once this is signed, the deed transfers cleanly. She'll never know. Everything will be in our name." I laughed then, a low, tired sound that surprised even me. It wasn't the laugh of a broken woman. It was the laugh of someone who had already seen the ending before the story began. I traced a finger across the wooden beam where Henry once carved our initials. He had proposed to me in this very attic, kneeling awkwardly on the old rug, too nervous to look me in the eye. I still remembered how he'd lifted one of the floorboards to hide the ring until the moment felt right. He'd said, "Some promises are meant to be kept secret until they save you." I pressed my palm against that same spot now, feeling the slight looseness in the wood. I didn't lift it yet. Not yet. Let them think they'd won. Let them have their moment. I'd always been patient. Brittany's laughter rose again from below. Make sure to sign with the loop high adjust like her birth certificate. It'll look authentic. Authentic. What a pretty word for theft. The house creaked as if remembering something. I looked up at the ceiling beams, dust falling like ash. They say old houses keep secrets, I murmured. Well, so do old women. I sank into Henry's old rocking chair by the window. The cushion still smelled faintly of tobacco and thyme. I folded my hands in my lap and waited. Not for Rescueno one was coming, but for the sound I knew would follow soon. The pen scratching across paper downstairs, the sound of betrayal dressed up as business. When it came, it was almost gentle, like rain tapping on a tin roof, the noise of a signature being forged. I closed my eyes. Go ahead, I whispered. Write my name. You've already erased everything else. The light shifted, painting the attic in gold. Outside, the magnolia tree bloomed early that year. I took a deep breath, my chest rising steady, calm. The door below clicked once more. Somewhere, Brittany laughed again high and bright, like glass breaking. I didn't laugh back. I just watched the red light of the camera blink in the corner, steady and alive, the only witness I needed. It started with a birth certificate. Aaron's, to be exact, issued in 1983, with my name printed neatly under Mother. Brittany found it in one of my old memory boxes while pretending to organize family documents. I remember the day she asked to take it for safekeeping. At the time, I thought nothing of it. It was just paper. But a year later, that paper became her blueprint for theft. She began her lessons in secret, late at night, at the kitchen island I had once polished myself every Sunday morning. The house was quiet, the kids asleep, Aaron snoring softly in the next room. Only the hum of the refrigerator kept her company. A lamp cast a cone of light over a pile of tracing paper, the original birth certificate pressed beneath a glass pane. Her manicured nails tapped the edge of a pen before she began. Curved V, soft loop, neat tail, she whispered like a prayer. Perfect. She practiced every night. Dozens of sheets, hundreds of loops, the sound of ink scratching rhythmically across paper. Each attempt got closer, smoother, more convincing. Sometimes she'd mutter my name just to hear it out loud, testing the rhythm of the letters. Veronica Holloway, she murmured. Old-fashioned, slow, weak. One night, Aaron caught her. I can imagine the confusion in his voice, the same voice that once told me, "Don't worry, Mom, Brittany just wants to help." He leaned on the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "You're obsessed, Britt. It's creepy." She didn't even look up. "I'm preparing for our future," she said simply, tracing another perfect V. Aaron frowned. "Future? What are you talking about?" Brittany smirked. "You don't get rich waiting for old people to dig you help them along." She said it lightly, almost playfully, but it wasn't a joke. She blew gently on the wet ink and smiled at her reflection in the glossy surface. Aaron shifted uncomfortably, the remnants of decency flickering in his eyes. "That's not funny." "Oh, relax," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's just preparation. You know how your mom gets so emotional about her will. We'll just have it ready, in case she suddenly changes her mind. It's practical." "Forgery isn't practical, Brittany." She laughed then, low and sharp. "It's only forgery if someone notices." He didn't answer. He just walked away, muttering something I'm sure even he didn't believe. And that was the problem with Aaron. He mistook silence for goodness. He always had. Brittany kept at it, growing bolder. She bought calligraphy pens to match the weight of my writing. She studied the tremor of elderly hands, mimicking it by holding her wrist loosely. When her lines wobbled just right, she smiled, satisfied. She even practiced signing with a slight rightward slant, just as mine did after arthritis began to set in. Every detail mattered. Weeks turned into months. She created a folder on her laptop named House Docs, filled with scanned signatures, photocopies of notarized papers, property files all labeled and organized. She even forged fake drafts of legal letters to get comfortable with formatting. Each file was a piece of her quiet war. When she wasn't practicing, she rehearsed her act. She'd look in the mirror and say, "Oh, Mom, you know I just want what's best for everyone." Smile, blink, tilt her head. Innocence perfected. She trained her voice to quiver with fake concern, to sound like sympathy instead of manipulation. Once, Erin walked in again, holding a beer, and watched her sign another document with that same cold grace. "You really think you can pull this off?" he asked quietly. Brittany looked up, her expression unbothered. "Erin, people see what they want to see. Your mother wants peace, not paperwork. When she's gone, you'll thank me." He hesitated. "She's not gone yet." Brittany's lips curled into something between a smile and a sneer. "Then she's late." Erin left the room again, slower this time. Maybe he told himself he didn't understand. Maybe that made it easier to live with. By spring, Brittany could replicate my signature perfect, every loop, every line, every tired tremble that came from years of grading papers and writing grocery lists. She pinned one of her practice sheets to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a heart. To anyone else, it looked like my handwriting, an old note left by me. To her, it was proof of mastery. She began testing it in small ways, signing my name on delivery forms, writing notes to the gardener, leaving friendly reminders to the HOA. Each time, she checked the reactions. No one noticed. No one ever does when the villain wears perfume and pearls. Sometimes, I wonder if she practiced, even when she didn't need to, just to feel powerful. There's a thrill in control for people like her, the quiet satisfaction of erasing someone one letter at a time. The final night of her rehearsals, she lit a candle, poured herself a glass of wine, and traced the last signature with deliberate elegance. When she lifted her pen, she studied the ink drying under the lamplight. "Perfect," she whispered again. "She brought you into this world with this signature. Now it'll sign her out of it." She smiled at her reflection in the window, unaware that the darkness was already watching her back. The night it began, the house smelled like rosemary chicken and deceit. Brittany had set the table for something she rarely did unless there was an audience. Candles flickered, the kind of light meant to soften hard truths. Erin poured wine, his hands fidgeting, his smile too polite. I had learned long ago that in this family, politeness was the warning before betrayal. "Mom," Brittany began, slicing into her food without looking at me, "this house is just too much for you. You shouldn't have to worry about maintenance, taxes, or insurance at your age. Let us handle the papers. You'll still live here, of course." Her tone was smooth, almost rehearsed. I set down my fork and looked at her. "You mean," I said, "I'll live in my house while you own it?" She didn't even flinch. Her lips curved into a small smirk. "Come on, Veronica. You're too old to understand tax laws. This is just simplifying things." Erin reached for his glass, avoiding my eyes. "She's right, Mom. It's just a signature. You'll always have your room." "Rooms can be shared," I said softly. "Ownership can't." The words hung in the air, heavy as truth always is when no one wants to hear it. Brittany gave a light laugh and pushed her plate away. "God, you make everything sound dramatic. It's paperwork, not a funeral." I smiled faintly. Sometimes they're the same thing. Erin looked at me then, eyes full of discomfort instead of guilt. "We're trying to help you, Mom. You're making it sound like we're stealing from you." "Are you?" I asked quietly. He froze. Brittany stepped in before he could answer. "You know, this is exactly why people end up in retirement homes," she said, her tone syrupy sweet. "They get suspicious, paranoid, stubborn. We're trying to make things easier for everyone." "For everyone?" I repeated. "Except me." Brittany rolled her eyes and reached for her wine. "You're impossible." I wanted to stand, to leave, but I didn't. I just watched them both, my son and his wife, two people who once claimed to love me, sitting at my table, plotting to erase me from my own deed. The chicken on my plate had gone cold. When dinner ended, Brittany stacked the plates quickly, as though she couldn't wait to clear away the evidence of what had just been said. "We'll bring the documents by next week," she said over her shoulder. "Just sign where the tabs are. Erin will explain." "Of course he will," I murmured. Erin touched my shoulder lightly, a gesture that might have once been tender. "Don't worry, Mom," he said softly. "It's not a big deal." I looked at his hand, then at him. It's always a big deal when family stops calling it one. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the quiet dark of my room, the clock ticking like a heartbeat. The air felt too still, too heavy, as though the house itself was holding its breath. I reached for the framed photo of Henry on my nightstand. His smile was as gentle as ever, frozen in the memory of better days. "They're circling the house like vultures, Henry," I whispered. "But vultures forget who built the nest." The moonlight stretched across the floor, pale and sharp, spilling over the stack of unpaid bills on the dresser. I ran my fingers over them absently. For years I had paid, repaired, maintained, and loved this place. Every nail and floorboard held a piece of my life. Now it was being reduced to a transaction. A week later, Brittany showed up again, dressed in a white blouse and carrying a folder embossed with gold letters. "Holloway Realty Group." "Here it is," she said cheerfully. "Just needs your signature. It's just a transfer of liability, purely legal jargon. You'll be free of all responsibility." "Free?" I asked. "That's an interesting word for homelessness." Aaron's voice cracked slightly. "Mom, please, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I studied the papers. I could see the faint lines of my name typed neatly, the space for my signature already flagged with a yellow tab. My fingers brushed the paper. It was smooth, heavy, expensive, like all good lies. "Why do you need it so urgently?" I asked. Brittany smiled. "We're refinancing. Better interest rate. Totally routine." "Routine," I echoed, nodding. "And when the house is in your name?" Her smile widened. "Then it's official." Aaron shifted beside her, guilt flickering like a dying light bulb. "We'll take care of you," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "You already stopped doing that a long time ago." They left not long after, the folder tucked safely back under Brittany's arm. As their car pulled away, I watched from the window, my reflection faint against the glass. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from realization. They weren't asking, they were planning. I stayed up late again that night, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold. The moonlight spilled across the linoleum, and the refrigerator hummed softly behind me. On the counter lay a stack of old receipts, the original mortgage, Henry's will-all, the things that tied me to this house. I ran my hand over the papers, tracing his signature, the one that had built our life. "I see what you built for me," I whispered, "and I see what they're trying to take." By the time dawn broke, my decision had already been made. I folded the documents, tucked them neatly into a drawer, and locked it. I looked around the kitchen one more time. Every tile, every creak in the floor, every quiet breath of the house we'd built together. "They think I'll just sign," I said softly to the empty air. "But they've forgotten who taught them to read." The attic was dark, except for a thin blade of sunlight cutting through the cracks of the window. Dust drifted lazily in the beam, dancing like ghosts of the past. I sat perfectly still on the old rug Henry and I had laid there decades ago, listening to the muffled voices beneath me. To anyone else, I might have looked frightened, an old woman trembling in the shadows. But fear had left me 2 days ago, when I first learned the truth. 2 days earlier, I had been on my way to the kitchen when I heard their voices from the study. I stopped at the foot of the stairs, the sound of my name halting me mid-step. Brittany's tone was sharp, impatient. "Once she signs it, it's ours." Aaron's voice followed, hesitant, lower. "And if she refuses?" Brittany's reply was a whisper so smooth it could cut glass. "Then I'll sign it for her." I stood there for a long time, staring at the wallpaper, the same one Henry had put up with his own hands. Something inside me went still, not anger, not sadness, just an understanding so cold it burned. They weren't guessing. They were planning. I could have called the police right then. But proof speaks louder than panic hand. I wanted their confession, not just their punishment. I didn't call the police that night. I made tea instead. People think silence means surrender. They forget that silence is also how you listen. And in those hours before dawn, I listened to every creak of the house, every whisper of wind, every memory Henry had left me. Then I remembered something: the attic floorboard near the window, the one he had lifted on the night he proposed. "He lifted that board," I murmured, "and gave me forever." That was where he had hidden the ring all those years ago. And that was where I decided to hide my salvation. The next morning, while Brittany was out shopping and Aaron was glued to his computer, I went up to the attic quietly. My joints ached with every step, but purpose steadied me. I lifted that same loose board and slid an old phone beneath iTone of Henry's, the kind people stopped using when screens got too bright and lives got too public. I charged it, set it to record, and turned on the voice activation. It was a relic, but so was I, and we were both about to prove our worth. By the time they lured me upstairs with promises of peace and a gift, everything was ready. I only had to play my part. Now, sitting in that dim room, I could hear Brittany's voice rise again from below. "Sign it now." Aaron's response was barely a murmur. "Britt, what if she asks questions?" "She won't," she hissed. "She's too old to notice anything." I almost laughed. Too old to notice, too old to matter, too old to fight. They had no idea that age doesn't dull the mind, it sharpens it, like a knife that's been through too many meals to ever break again. I knelt slowly, pressing my palm against the floorboards until I found the loosened edge. The wood lifted with a soft sigh. Beneath it, my secret waited. I reached down and pulled out the phone, its screen faintly glowing in the dark. A red dot blinked, recording, just as planned. I set it near the vent that connected to the downstairs living room. Their voices filtered up clearer now, dripping with greed. "I'm not sure this looks right," Aaron said nervously. Brittany scoffed. "Stop being dramatic. It's her signature. I've practiced it for months." He hesitated. "Britt, if she finds out—" "She won't," Brittany snapped. "By the time she figures it out, we'll already have sold the place. Now shut up and hand me the pen." The scratch of ink filled the silence like a blade being drawn. I hit another button. Video. The small camera lens blinked once and began to record through the thin slat in the wall, angled perfectly at the stairwell where Brittany stood in full view, papers spread before her, hand poised with the pen. Her voice was steady, her smile sharp. When she finished signing, she laughed lightly. "There, Veronica Holloway, officially history." My reflection caught in the attic mirror a quiet, wrinkled smile forming on my lips. "Not quite," I whispered. The camera in the corner of the attic blinked in sync with the one below. I had installed them years ago after a string of neighborhood break-ins. Aaron had teased me for it. "No one's going to rob you, Mom," he'd said. "You're paranoid. Funny how paranoia becomes proof when you're patient enough." Those cameras uploaded to a cloud storage account Henry had set up automatic, silent, incorruptible. I stood and faced the little red light, now glowing faintly in the corner. "Smile, darling," I said softly, just loud enough for the mic to catch. "The law loves confessions." For the next hour, I waited. I listened to every word, every cruel laugh, every detail of their betrayal. When Brittany finally declared, "Let's unlock her tomorrow and pretend nothing happened," I turned off the recording. By the time they opened the attic door the next morning, I was sitting calmly by the window, holding Henry's photo in my lap. "You scared me," I said quietly, my voice trembling just enough to sound convincing. Brittany smiled, all fake pity and satisfaction. "Oh, Mom, it was just a misunderstanding." I nodded, meeting her eyes. "Of course it was." When she left, I waited until the car engine faded down the street. Then I took the phone, plugged it into my laptop, and transferred every file. Audio, video, timestamps. Then, with steady hands, I composed an email to Barrett Tour, old family lawyer and Henry's friend long before he ever became mine. Subject: urgent fraud and forgery evidence. Attachments: 2 audio files, 1 video clip. Message: Barrett, I think my family just signed their own eviction notice. I hit send. As the files uploaded, I looked around the attic one last time. The dust, the memories, the quiet, all witnesses to something they never expected. An old woman who refused to fade quietly. Downstairs, the phone began to ring. Aaron's voice echoed faintly. "Barrett? Wait. What do you mean by criminal liability?" I smiled. resting my hand on the spot where the floorboard hid my secret. "He lifted this board and gave me forever," I whispered to Henry's picture. "And today, you saved me again." The music stopped when I walked in. I could feel it, the shift in the air, that subtle panic when guilt meets surprise. The chandelier lights shimmered over a room full of well-dressed guests, clutching champagne glasses, laughter dying mid-breath. Brittany froze first, her smile collapsing like frosting left too long in the heat. "Oh," she said, voice sugar-slick but trembling at the edges. "You made it. I didn't think you'd come." "I wasn't invited," I said, stepping closer. "But I never miss a family celebration." Erin's face went pale. "Mom, this really isn't a good time." I looked around at the crowd. The banner above the fireplace read, "Sold New Beginnings," in bold gold letters. My house, my name still etched on the deed, at least for a few more hours. "New beginnings," I repeated softly. "How appropriate." Brittany gestured awkwardly to the server. "Someone get her a chair. She looks tired." "I'm not staying long," I said, holding up the small black USB drive between my fingers. "I just came to give a gift. You said I'd get one from the attic, so I brought one from there myself." Erin frowned. "Mom, please, let's not." "Oh, I insist." I walked to the television mounted above the fireplace and slipped the USB into the port. The screen flickered. A grainy video appeared dangled from above, catching the living room, the papers on the table, and Brittany's perfectly manicured hand holding a pen. Her voice filled the room. "Loop the V higher, like her birth certificate." Then Erin's, quiet and nervous. "Britt, what if she finds out?" "She's too old to notice anything," Brittany replied. The sound echoed through the room like a curse. Conversation stopped. Even the server froze, tray trembling in his hands. Someone gasped softly. Another whispered, "Oh my God." Erin took a step toward me, his face ashen. "Mom, how did you?" I turned to him slowly. "Do you remember the attic?" I asked. "Where your father proposed to me? That's where I saved your future and mine." Brittany's face twisted. "You recorded us? You sneaky old witch." I smiled faintly. "No, dear. I recorded history." The next clip rolled. Brittany laughing as she forged my signature, her voice calm and cold. "It's her signature. I've practiced it for months." Then her laugh again. "Veronica Holloway, officially history." The silence in the room thickened until you could hear nothing but the soft hum of the speakers. Then came the sound of sirens in the distance, growing louder, closer. Brittany looked around wildly. "Erin, do something, turn it off." He moved toward the TV, but I raised a hand. "Don't bother, darling. The files are already with my lawyer and the police. This is just the highlight reel." As if on cue, the front door burst open. 2 officers stepped in, followed by a man in a dark suit, Mr. Barrett. His presence filled the room with the weight of inevitability. "Mrs. Brittany Holloway?" one officer called. "You're under arrest for forgery, fraud, and unlawful confinement." Brittany's jaw dropped. "Unlawful what?" "For locking your mother-in-law in the attic," Barrett said calmly, pulling out a printed document. "There's a recording, time-stamped, uploaded to cloud storage. Quite thorough evidence." The officer took her by the arm. She tried to jerk away. "This is ridiculous. That old woman doesn't know what she's talking about." "Oh, but I do," I said gently. "Every detail, every word." She turned to Erin, panic overtaking her charm. "Say something. Tell them it's a misunderstanding." Erin couldn't look at her. His lips moved soundlessly before he whispered, "Brittany, stop." But she didn't stop. She lunged toward me, eyes burning. "You think this makes you better than me? You think people will love you for this? You're pathetic and old, lonely hag who can't stand being replaced." The officer pulled her back. "Ma'am, that's enough." I stood still, calm as the moonlight through the window. "I don't need to be loved," I said softly. "I just need to be remembered for the truth." The crowd began to murmur. Phones were out, some filming, some texting, all capturing the spectacle of a downfall in designer heels. Brittany's fury broke into sobs as she was led toward the door. "You'll regret this," she screamed over her shoulder. "I already did," I said, my voice steady. Every day I let you stay under my roof. She thrashed once, then the door slammed behind her. The echo rang through the marble floors, through the silence she left behind. Aaron stood frozen, staring at the spot where she'd been. His hands shook. Mom, I didn't know. For a brief second, I saw the little boy who once brought me wildflowers from the backyard, hiding behind the man who'd forgotten how to love. His face broken not from guilt, but from finally seeing who he had become. I turned to him, my tone sharper now. You let her lock me in my own home, I said. Now watch her unlock her cell. His eyes filled, but I didn't move to comfort him. Pity was a luxury I no longer afforded. Barrett placed a hand on my shoulder. Everything's in motion, Veronica. You'll have full restitution once the investigation concludes. I nodded. Thank you, Barrett. And the deed? He smiled faintly. Already filed back in your name. A ripple of gasps spread across the room. Someone whispered, She got everything back? I turned toward the guest people who had once toasted to my generosity and now gawked at my justice. Enjoy the rest of the evening, I said quietly. After all, it's still a celebration, just not the one you planned. As I walked toward the door, the night air met me like freedom itself, cool, sharp, and clean. Behind me, Aaron called out, Mom, wait please. I didn't turn around. You had your chance to stand up for me, Aaron. You chose silence. I was scared, he said, his voice breaking. So was I said. The difference is, I didn't let fear make me cruel. I stepped outside, closing the door gently behind me. The police car's lights painted the driveway red and blue. For a moment I thought of Henry again, his hand lifting that wooden board, his voice whispering, Forever starts here. I smiled to myself. It still does, I whispered, and walked into the night as the sirens faded behind me. The next morning, the world knew my name. Not the way I'd ever wanted, but in a way I'd earned. Every television channel, every social feed, every morning show, there I was, in my worn cardigan, silver hair brushed neatly back, sitting in my lawyer's office as the footage rolled again and again. The headline read in bold, Elderly widow outsmarts forger's camera footage, leads to arrests. They played the video from the attic, my calm voice drifting through the broadcast. Smile, darling, the law loves confessions. The anchor smiled faintly, almost in admiration. That line's going viral, she said. They're calling her the Georgia grandma who outsigned a criminal. The studio audience clapped. I sat at home, the television light flickering over my cup of tea, and let it all wash over me. No pride, not revenge, just the quiet relief of being heard after years of being dismissed. Aaron's photo appeared next on the screen. His expression, caught mid-interrogation, wasn't cruel anymore, just hollow. The reporter's voiceover was steady. Authorities have confirmed that Aaron Holloway faces charges of complicity in property fraud and unlawful confinement. The evidence, including forged documents matching his wife's handwriting, has been verified by forensic experts. I closed my eyes briefly. The tea had gone cold. Justice, it turns out, doesn't taste sweet, it tastes like peace, faintly bitter, but honest. Barrett called that afternoon. You're officially trending, he said, half amused. Number Grandma Justice has over 1 million mentions. I chuckled softly. Imagine that. All it took was a little fraud and a camera. They're even making shirts, he added. Your quotes on them. Which one? He hesitated, smiling through the phone. They locked me in a room but forgot I built it first. I couldn't help but laugh. A real one, the kind I hadn't let myself have in years. Henry would have liked that one, I said. Henry would have been proud, Barrett replied. The calls didn't stop. Local news wanted an interview. A podcast host left 3 voicemails. Even a talk show in Atlanta reached out. I declined most, but one request caught my eye from a young journalist named Claire, who said her grandmother had followed my story. She said you reminded her that age doesn't mean silence, the message read. Would you speak to us for her? So, I did. They filmed it in Barrett's office under soft studio lights that made the silver in my hair gleam like frost. Claire smiled nervously as the camera rolled. Mrs. Holloway, she began. "After everything you've been through, what keeps you so calm?" I sipped my tea before answering. "Because panic is what they count on," I said simply. "They locked me in a room, but forgot I built it first." Her jaw slackened slightly. "That's poetic." "It's practical," I said. "I was never helpless, just underestimated." When the interview aired that evening, it spread faster than wildfire. Women commented by the thousands: grandmothers, single mothers, retired teachers. "She's my hero. This is what strength looks like." They tried to bury her, they forgot she was the foundation. Even the late-night hosts picked it up. One of them quipped, "Don't mess with Grandma and Georgia, she's probably got better Wi-Fi and a lawyer." The audience roared with laughter, and for once, I didn't mind being the punchline. Because underneath it, there was truth and respect. The proof kept stacking against Brittany. The forensic analyst confirmed that the forged signature on the deed matched her practice sheets exactly. The curvature of the V, the trailing line of the yits, an identical match, the report read. Consistent with the same hand over multiple rehearsed samples. Aaron's guilt was quieter but undeniable. His emails, his bank transfers, all signs of a man who knew and chose to look away. The prosecutor called it willful blindness. I called it cowardice. When they escorted Brittany into court in handcuffs, cameras flashed like lightning. She tried to hide her face, but the world had already seen it, the woman who'd learned to forge, not to love. I didn't attend the hearing. I watched from home, wrapped in a shawl Henry had given me our first winter together. I had no interest in spectacle. The truth had already spoken for itself. The mail that week was overwhelming. Dozens of letters arrived, some typed, some handwritten, all carrying the same message: "Thank you for showing us it's never too late to stand up." I kept one of them, a short note from a woman in Kansas who wrote, "My daughter says when she grows up, she wants to be like you, unshakable." I smiled, folded it carefully, and slipped it between the pages of Henry's old Bible. The reporters called again, wanting a follow-up story. I agreed, just once more. The segment aired on Sunday evenings, low piano music, gentle light, me sitting on my porch as the Georgia sun bled orange over the horizon. The reporter asked softly, "Mrs. Holloway, what do you hope people take from your story?" I looked past the camera, toward the road winding away from my house, the one I'd nearly lost. "That age doesn't erase worth," I said. "And that respect, once gone, can be collected with interest." The camera lingered on my smile, on the teacup in my hand, on the house behind me that I had reclaimed, not through anger, but through proof. By the time the credits rolled, the internet had already crowned me again. The Georgia grandma who outsigned a criminal. But the title I liked best came from a quiet corner of the web, a comment beneath the video, written by someone who clearly understood. "She didn't fight for revenge," it said. "She fought for receipts." That night, I closed the curtains, turned off the TV, and stood for a long time by the window. The world outside glowed with porch lights and justice, and for the first time in years, I slept without locking the door. The courthouse smelled like old paper, and cold air. Justice never had much warmth to it, but that morning it felt alive. The marble floors gleamed, the echoes of footsteps weaving between whispers and camera clicks. They were all there for the verdict, for her verdict. Brittany sat at the defense table in a tailored gray suit that tried and failed to look respectable. Her perfect hair couldn't hide the twitch in her jaw or the tremor in her manicured hands. Aaron sat beside her, paler than I'd ever seen him, eyes fixed on the floor. I sat behind my lawyer, calm, steady, the way only someone who's already been through worse can be. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. A woman in her 60s, with a voice like sharpened, steel-measured, deliberate. "This court," she began, "has reviewed the evidence in full. Audio recordings, video documentation, and handwriting analysis." She looked down at Brittany with a level gaze. "It's rare to see premeditation this meticulous and this cruel." Brittany straightened, trying to salvage an ounce of dignity. Her attorney whispered something, but she didn't respond. She was staring at the screen where the evidence replayed one last time, her own voice, rehearsing my signature like a prayer to greed. Curved V, soft loop, neat tale. Perfect. The judge's words cut through the air. For the crimes of forgery, fraud, and unlawful confinement, this court sentences Brittany Holloway to 8 years in state prison. The sound of the gavel hitting wood echoed like thunder. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Brittany's mother sobbed quietly in the back. Brittany herself went still, like a porcelain doll that had finally cracked. Aaron's lawyer stood next. "Your Honor, my client was misled." The judge held up a hand. "Mr. Holloway was complicit in multiple acts of concealment. Ignorance is not innocence." She turned toward him. "You may not have held the pen, but you held the door while she used it." Aaron's throat worked, but no words came. "Therefore," she continued, "the court rules that Mr. Aaron Holloway forfeits any and all rights to inheritance or ownership of the Holloway estate. Additionally, he is to pay full restitution for his mother's legal expenses." The gavel struck again. Final. Irrevocable. I didn't smile. Not yet. I simply breathed, deeply, quietly. It wasn't triumph that filled my lungs, it was oxygen. Freedom has its own scent, and it smells a lot like old wood and clean air. When the proceedings ended, the bailiff called for order. The reporters surged forward as the judge exited, their questions tumbling over one another like a wave. Flashbulbs burst across the aisle, bright and blinding. Brittany was led out in handcuffs. Her lawyer whispered something about appeals, but she wasn't listening. She turned once, just long enough for our eyes to meet. I didn't see the sharp-danged girl who mocked me. I saw fear, a hollow kind that eats through arrogance until nothing's left. Aaron tried to follow me out, but Barrett stepped between us. "Give her space," he said firmly. I walked through the hallway as the cameras followed. Every click of my shoes echoed louder than their questions. "Mrs. Holloway," one called, "do you have any statement for the press?" I stopped, turned, and faced the wall of microphones. My reflection stared back at me from a dozen camera lenses, silver hair, calm eyes, the ghost of a smile. "She spent a year forging my signature," I said evenly. "I spent 70 perfecting my backbone." The silence broke like glass. Then came the sound of applause from everyone, but enough to fill the hall. A bailiff, a clerk, even one of the jurors saw clapping quietly, respectfully. I nodded once and walked toward the exit. Outside, the air was bright and biting. Reporters shouted my name again, but I was already done speaking. Justice didn't need noise. It had already been written, signed, and sealed. Barrett caught up beside me. "It's over, Veronica," he said, handing me a copy of the final judgment. "The house is legally and fully yours again. The deed's been transferred this morning." I ran my fingers along the embossed paper, the ink still fresh, smelling faintly of permanence. "You know," I said softly, "I always liked the smell of ink. It reminds me of Henry. He signed our first mortgage with a pen just like this." Barrett smiled. "You've got your house, your name, your peace." I nodded, eyes on the courthouse steps. "I didn't just get them back," I said. "I reclaimed what they thought age had erased." At the bottom of the steps, a young reporter tried once more. "Mrs. Holloway, what will you do now?" I looked at her kindly. "Live," I said simply. "And make sure no one else signs away their dignity." The courthouse flag rippled in the wind as Barrett opened the car door. 8 years, restitution, my name restored, but none of it compared to the quiet relief of surviving my own blood. As the car pulled away, I watched justice fade behind me, smelling faintly of ink, truth, and peace. A year later, the house finally sounded like mine, again quiet, honest, and filled only with the hum of morning light sliding through the curtains. No shouts, no slammed doors, no footsteps that didn't belong. Just peace, brewed fresh with every cup of tea. Life had grown simple again, though not small. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I walked to the local community center, low red brick building with creaky floors and a smell of old books, and taught a class titled Protecting Your Paper, Elder Rights 101. The first day, only 4 women showed up. By the end of the second month, the classroom was full, 22 faces, gray-haired and bright-eyed, notebooks open, pens ready like soldiers before battle. Some had been cheated by family, others by strangers, but all of them came for the same reason: to stop letting fear sign their names for them. I began every session the same way. I'd hold up an old pen, Henry's pen, the one he used to sign our first deed together, and say, "This is the most dangerous weapon you'll ever hold. Don't let anyone else use it." They'd laugh at first, but it always sank in. One morning, during the Q&A, a woman named Alma raised her hand. "Mrs. Holloway," she said softly, "why do you teach this? After everything you've been through, don't you ever just want to forget?" I smiled. "I didn't start teaching to be admired," I said. "I did it because that quote ended up on a flyer, and soon seniors from nearby towns arrived with questions about wills and signatures they didn't remember writing. Some cried, others left standing taller. The center's director framed my photo with the caption, 'Justice doesn't expire.' At home, beside Henry's picture, I kept the old phone labeled, 'For the love that saved me twice.' Sometimes, neighbors would stop by to chat. Kids from down the street waved as they rode past on bikes. A few of them recognized me from the news. 'You're that grandma from the camera story,' they'd say, wood-eyed. I'd grin. That's me, the one who remembered to press record. The truth is, I still kept camera, small ones, tucked quietly in corners, blinking their steady red lights. Not because I was afraid, but because vigilance had become a quiet comfort. It wasn't paranoia, it was legacy. One evening, the local paper sent a young reporter for a follow-up interview. Her name was Ellie, and she couldn't have been more than 25. She looked around my tidy living room, noting every frame, every carefully arranged photo. "Do you ever think about your son?" she asked, gentle but direct. I took a breath. "Every day," I said. "He writes sometimes, small notes, apologies that sound more like sighs than sentences. I forgive him, just not for forgetting who I was. That takes time." She hesitated. "And Brittany?" I stirred my tea slowly. "Prison teaches lessons people like her never thought they needed. She'll come out differenter, she won't. Either way, I've already moved on." Ellie nodded, scribbling furiously. "What's the biggest thing you've learned from all of this?" I looked toward the window, where sunlight caught the dust just right, turning it into something almost holy. "That they thought silence would hide their lies," I said softly. "But silence records everything. It just waits for playback." She froze for a moment, then smiled, realizing it was the kind of line people remember. "That's perfect," she whispered. After she left, I sat on the porch, the air thick with honeysuckle and crickets' song. The camera's red light blinked softly, once survival, now remembrance. I thought of Henry lifting that loose board, saying, "Forever starts here." He was right. Forever returned the night I lifted it again, not for love, but proof. Proof and love now sat side by side beneath Georgia twilight. Peace rarely comes through forgiveness. Sometimes it arrives through evidence. As the camera blinked steady above me, I smiled. Justice doesn't sleep, it simply keeps recording. A year later, people still wrote to Meloders, emails, messages. Some said I was brave, others said I was lucky. But I knew better. I was just prepared. And that was my story, a tale of ink, silence, and the quiet kind of justice that never needed to raise its voice. If it made you smile or whisper, "Finally," under your breath, then you already understand what stories like this are for. So before you go, don't forget subscribe to Grandma True Stories. Because out here, every week, we share the voices of women who've lived long enough to know that kindness has limits, but dignity never does. If you believe justice deserves to be heard, hit that hype button, share this story, and help keep the light on for every grandma who refuses to be silenced. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the camera catches lies, but it also records strength.